All right. So thank you for coming out to Flyleaf Books tonight.
Hey, y'all, quiet in the back. Good Lord.
I think some people are still going to trickle in, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Thank you for coming out tonight to Flyleaf Books and supporting an independent bookstore as well as an awesome author. Your attendance and book purchases let us keep having these events, so we really appreciate it. You got a letter when you checked in today. That is your signing group. If you didn't get a signing group, then you can just check in with us at the very end, or you can assume the final signing group, whatever you would like. But yes, that will be just how we start the signing line. So we'll go in stages after the talk. So that's just to keep you not having to stand in a long line spinning around the store, and instead you can sit, or you can talk, or you can browse, whatever you want to do. In a moment, we have the pleasure of hearing from Tom Maxwell about his brand new book, A Really Strange and Wonderful Time with Bill Smith. Tom Maxwell is a writer and a musician. A product of the fertile Chapel Hill music scene, he was a member of the Squirrel Nut Zippers from 1994 to 1999. He is a member of the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. Bill Smith is the author of 2 cookbooks and many articles and essays in various magazines and journals. In 2019, he retired after 25 years as head chef at Crook's Corner in Chapel Hill. He was also co-owner of the Cat's Cradle from 1972 to 1984. And thank you to Cat's Cradle for being here tonight. We hope you enjoy the talk. Thank you again, and remember, A Really Strange and Wonderful Time is available for sale at the registers if you haven't gotten one, or if you need another couple copies, whatever.
Cradle's selling shirts, and they have a ticket giveaway.
Oh, great. Cradle is also selling merch and shirts, and has a ticket giveaway, so that's very exciting. Woo! All right, I'm going to turn it over to these guys. I'll be back to talk to you about the groups and the signing line after the talk.
The Chapel Hill sound.
That's how they lure me over here. Yeah. Okay, well, first let me say that I got the galley of this book back in January when I was doing a bit of traveling, and it was my companion. I love this book. I love this book. It's like a play-by-play of a really important time in music here in the town. And if you know me, you know that I think that the music in this town is great art, and I'll beat you up if you fight over it. So anyway, I don't know how, there's so much stuff in this book. I don't know how you did it, honestly. I really don't.
I cheated.
You must have or something. I don't know what you did, but anyway, so I want him to do most of the talking. I'm notorious for not shutting up, so you throw things or something.
I want to interview Bill.
You already did.
He did that thing for Bitter Southerner, but who among us doubts that this whole thing wouldn't have existed without Cat's Cradle and without people?
Yes, we were very lucky about that, but that wasn't just me. So, but anyway, so why don't you start by telling a little bit about this time frame that you chose, sort of why. I know you were here during it anyway. But
parochial.
Yeah, but maybe just talk a little about the time.
Well, it coincided with a couple of things at the sort of bookends. And on the one end, it was, I think, the formation of sort of the local industry of infrastructure of Merge Records and Mammoth Records, both of which functionally started in 1989. And then there's a bunch of other stuff too. And then when the giant digital curtain rang down in 1999, which coincided with a lot of these bands sort of ultimately just kind of having run their course, but also that huge shift, I think, in the landscape of the industry. It seemed, end of the millennia, it seemed like a good time to end it if my goal wasn't to write The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which it should have been.
Well, there's still time.
Part 7.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And you mentioned the 2 big record labels.
Yeah.
Which we still have.
One of them.
One of them. That's
thank goodness.
One of them got eaten by Disney or something.
One of them got eaten. Yeah.
But there were also in this, there were like a whole bunch of little independent labels and stuff. I knew some of the names of them, but I didn't know all of them. Talk a little bit about those folks. That was amazing to me. And they found places to get them pressed, and they did the
and a
covers
lot
down
of
at
that,
the printer shop and all this stuff.
a lot of that will come down to Mac McConn's. So you got Todd Goss at Jettison Records. Jettison put out the Zen Frisbee records and a bunch of other stuff too, Mind Sirens and stuff. And Todd's like, I just was putting out shit I liked, It's great. And he called Mac, and Mac was like, okay, here's where we get them pressed, here's where we get them, here's distribution and all that stuff. And it happened all the time. It happened with Kelly Cox at Moist Records, and he teamed up with Andrew Peterson at Moist Bated Breath. And that was very much of a community thing as well. And then all them guys, Lane will tell you, they're all playing pickup basketball in some parking lot, after hours. I forgot the question.
We were talking about
okay.
all the little
Detox in Greensboro. Cheryl's going to know this better than me. Jettison, Moist Bated Breath, Kitchen Puff. I mean, there were people. They were just labels. Were just
some bands even have their own labels.
Yeah, Polvo had
did
Kitchen Puff. Yeah. And I just think they sprouted like mushrooms because there was a need, and they filled that need.
Yeah.
Robert Slice told me that he went to a house party in Chapel Hill, and that next to an armchair was a stack of 7-inch singles by local bands, and it came up to the arm on the chair.
And then you mentioned also there was that collection that came out. I want to say Purple. Is that Purple in the name of it? There were 6 or 7 little 45s.
Evil I Do Not, Do Not
right.
I Live.
Yeah.
Released in 1989. 87. And there were 5 bands, a lot of Raleigh bands on there, right? So Black Girls were on there. Wax, Slush Puppies, Mac McConn's bands, and other bands too. And this is where I think Mac got kind of clued into this idea of, well, a couple of things. One, it's good to document because everybody breaks up, so it's good to make recordings. 2, you don't have to be a headline act to sort of band together and put this thing out, and they did well. So as a sort of a collective, these 5 or 6 bands were able to play the Cradle or whatever and more or less sell it out, and the brewery, when normally the most they would have done was open for somebody else.
Right.
So that kind of hipped him to that whole thing. That's what he told me. So
Yeah.
I felt like that was, and that's where they learned, here's the pressing plant we go to. Here's the guys that are going to do the artwork, and here's how we stuff sleeves and all that sort of brick and mortar stuff.
Another part of that same thing is that Jamie McPhail, you quote.
Love Jamie McPhail.
Laura Balance, you also quoted, saying that actually a lot of these people were doing the music because they loved it, and if they made some money, then great. But they were going to do it anyway.
That's right.
And that's real important, I think. That's a
I
really
agree with you.
point of view.
I agree with you. The downside of that is that there became a kind of a trope among non-musician types that the most authentic music was made by starving people.
That's true.
Which I promise you is not true, nor is it made by heroin addicts. However, you should feel called, right? And back then, oh God, there was this idea, you just do it, and you do it because for the love of it and the joy of expression. You get to see all your friends.
You're supposed to suffer,
and that it's just wonderful, and maybe there might be a beer or a meal or $20 in there somewhere.
Yeah. And you listed at the beginning. Actually, some people we get $20 a night or something like that.
Teasing the Korean opened for the Cowboy Junkies at the Shoebox Cradle in 1986, and we had to give them our $16 so they could put gas in their van to get to Atlanta. And we were like, whatever, fuck it, $16. We can walk.
I think that's really wonderful, actually.
Yeah.
This is a little sidestep, but when you were talking about tropes, there was also the trope that nobody danced in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, that was true.
But I came across it today. I forgot about that, and I can't tell you how many bands came up to me later and they said, we thought everybody hated us, and they all went crazy at the end, and they stood and stared at us.
There was the zone.
Yeah, there was like a...
There was the zone, like Chernobyl. And it was a half circle that would radiate as far as 10 to 15 feet from the front of the stage, and not one son of a bitch would cross that line. And they'd all stand in the back, like Sam the Eagle. And John Enslin talks about it, and he's like, I loved it because it cut out all the friendly bullshit. Like, people would come up and go, that was a great set, and you knew they meant it. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, like I said, this is like, there's so much. I made a few notes. Let me look at what I wrote down real quick. There's so much in here. We barely probably got lucky to get past the first year, but let's see.
I feel lucky to have gone past the first year.
XYC. We need to talk about that.
We
for
do.
Sure.
We do.
I'm on the board of XYC, but still, I love that section so much. It's had its ups and downs, but we owe them a great deal, I think, all in all. And at the beginning of this, again, a lot of the people who moved into the music business here had been DJs at XYC.
Hi, Glenn Booth.
Yeah, Glenn Booth was one of them.
And
more than him, too.
So many. I know.
Yeah,
About WXYC, I think that what the book really is not a chronological retrospective of wonderful music made by very talented people, which it is. But what it really is a kind of a proof of concept of the genius of community and this interlocking, nurturing infrastructure that we all thrived in. And it's not just the musicians, it's not just those wonderful guitar players in Poldo. It's the fact that WXYC would play your stuff if you put it on cart. And you'd be driving in your car and hear your song on WXYC and shit your pants. It was wonderful. They were massively a part of the community in terms of support. It was open format. I would not have written Hell had I not been driving home from a rehearsal and heard the 1937 recording of Seven Skeletons Found in the Yard by Lord Executor. And I was given new raiment. And I went out and bought the record. School kids that, not our Hooli, but whoever David Manconi just wrote about, had just reissued. Rounder. Yeah. And boom, there you go, right? So then I get to be conversant in pre-war calypso music. That's WXYC. And the first station ever to simulcast in the fall of 1994. Just yet another way they distinguished themselves. And fool me thought that every college town was like that and had a station like that.
Well, I came from the land of top 40, and it taught me to have like Catholic taste. I like everything now. I can't wait. I mean, in this town, you'll see everything eventually. Everything comes here at some point.
What I love about XYC, and I hope it's still the case, is that I'm an omnivore, and they would always at some point play something I considered unlistenable.
Oh yeah,
and I'd be like,
the chainsaw.
That's so cool. That's great.
Yeah, that definitely.
Yeah.
And when what was his name? There was a music director there for a while that insisted on hours of screechy jazz. I'd like to see his face.
I don't have all the
They live in San Francisco now. I mean, I really like him. I can't think.
Kerry McLaren, who did a bunch of stuff and also worked in the industry, was a DJ there and talked about what a community it was for people who weren't, sort of introvert types, and how you could go up there and it was there was non-alcoholic, and you could crash on the sofa and you could talk to people about music and how tightly knit that thing was,
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
The last few years, the management there has sort of come back around to that in a really good way, I think. And in fact, it's funny you should say. The other night we had a board meeting and we went in there and the power had gone out at the union, and we all piled into the station and sort of sat on the edges of chairs and stuff because they wouldn't let anybody else in, but they let us in because the radio station had to keep going, and it has a backup generator. So, but yeah, so it was that same sort of thing, and all these people that know all these different things about music and all kinds of music.
Again, just enthusiasts, right?
Yeah,
Steve Balcom. I mean, yeah.
And I listen to it all the time. Okay, XYC. Well, Backyard Barbecue. That was
Frank
on XYZ. That was great. That was all local music, right?
Right, Steve?
Yes.
Glenn? Who else? It was Frank and Steve and who?
And Glenn.
Yes, three of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was all local stuff.
All of us, yeah. Well, it was before a lot of stuff was out, so a lot of times it was playing demo tapes.
Yeah.
And Glenn, thank you. did Demo Listen, which was a
Demo
compilation of local,
Right.
literally local demo tapes. Glenn did WXYC night at Club Zen, and also it's analog at the Cradle.
Yeah, I wasn't involved with that. Though.
You were not. That wasn't your thing. Well, it is in the book, so. Thanks, Glenn. And then goes on to come damn close to signing Polvo to Caroline, yeah. And also XYC, the Madonna-thon,
Yes.
which was a precursor to the Big Stardom Record Convention, a kind of a proof of concept of that. So, whatever, indispensable, like the Cradle, indispensable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were lucky to have all those good moving parts here.
They're necessary, right?
Yeah. We also have like record producers and people that and studios and things here too that most people don't even know about that. But you can have your work done by really good professionals.
Well, yeah. Damn, goes right out of my head.
Well,
Jerry
Caleb, for
Jerry
instance.
and Raleigh. Jerry Key, Duck Key Studios.
Yeah.
Ton of bands recorded there.
Yeah.
Including Wax and Slush Puppies before Chunk and Super Chunk. And then Steve Gronbach's place. A proper studio. West Lachaux, a proper studio. And then Caleb Southern. And there's two people, I think, in the book who are actual sort of the through lines in the book. In this book of such marvelous diversity of expression. Frank Heath and Caleb Southern. And Caleb Southern either mixed your band or recorded your band, and there were no exceptions. And Caleb became a producer of singular ability and was able to record. Well, he did everybody, right? He did Superchunk, he did Ben Folds 5 records, which are pretty fucking good. He did most of the Zen Frisbee records, I think, once he got on board. And he was able to see what those individual artists of varying whatever abilities or modes of expression, what they were going for. He did Metal Flake Mother. So one, peace be upon him, and thanks to him. And I think, like, if you don't have the recording, then what you have is a memory or some horrible board tape of a live performance or something that someone told you. And the reason that we can talk about a lot of these bands, including Metal Flake Mother, who imploded Muy Rapido, is
that one fabulous record. Though.
Because of that one fabulous record and Caleb. And Lou Giordano, So I could go on and on.
Why don't you? Let's talk about some of your bands.
Yeah, I was in a couple bands.
Yeah.
Both with terrible names.
One had two names. Right?
Yeah. One had, yeah. It's always with John Enslin. John Enslin, who I don't think is here tonight, but in many ways that I consider the book, I don't know, a corrective. I don't know if that's the right word, but like on the outside, people are like, yes, they know about Archers of Loaf, and well, they should. And they know about Superchunk, and well, they should. People who didn't live through it are not going to know about Metal Flake Mother necessarily, or Zen Frisbee necessarily, or John Enslin necessarily. But John Enslin is an extraordinary figure, I think, and a huge effect on my life as a performer and a lyricist and a songwriter. So I was in bands with John for yonks when we were both awful, and then we got a little less awful. And then I was in a band called Squirrel Nut Zippers and blah, blah, blah. And the reason that we thought we could do it at all was because of Chapel Hill. Because Chapel Hill, as Jamie McPhail said when I was interviewing Jamie and she gave me she just sort of stated the thesis of the book. It was like, we weren't interested in people recapitulating the thing that was popular. We were interested in people being sort of authentically who they were. And it didn't matter if they were necessarily that good, technically. If they were making an authentic sound, that was exciting to us. So the band that could produce Archers of Loaf could also produce Squirrel Nut Zippers and could also produce Ben Folds 5 without any sort of contradiction at all. And that's the community. That's not the bands, that's the community.
And we have a willing audience here now too. I mean,
Always
as
have.
I was telling you earlier,
Always have.
I know, but it's altered a little bit now because of social media. I drop into the back room of the Cradle a lot, and there's all these bands I've never heard of there. They're always getting, they're children as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, they're all in there. They're all in there. They all get 200 or 300 people who I've never heard of the band. I don't know who these kids are, who the audience is. They all know the words because they've all seen it on TikTok or on Spotify or whatever. So these people have gather these little tribes. These bands are all everywhere. And so it doesn't even matter almost now whether they're on the radio or anything. It doesn't seem like they just. I think that's so great. I was there last week, and there were these two bands that were out of this world. There's a woman, I can't remember their name. There's a woman that she had the best voice, and all these people would come in, and they were all singing where they're on. And I never heard of them. I felt really out of it, but I was really pleased to see that it was going on. And like on a Monday night.
My enduring image of Bill Smith is stage left monitor at the Cat's Cradle with a Pabst Blue Ribbon in his hand. And he is the imprimatur of anything good.
I'm recreating that now.
Yeah.
No, as I've said, I spoke at Dexter's thing this week, and it sort of hit me while I was standing there. And I sound like an idiot, I'm sure, but I realized that I can't sing or play an instrument. I've never been in a band. I've just been sort of this desperate hanger-on to all this. But it means so much to me, and I've lived here for almost 70 years, no, 60 years now, and that's why. That's really the reason was the art, and our art is music, and I mean the restaurants let me stay. That's what kept me going. But no, that was why, and it means a lot to me. I hope it does to everyone.
At the risk. It's not possible for overstatement to talk about how great Dexter Romweber was.
Oh yeah.
And the first show I saw in Chapel Hill was at Rhythm Alley right after Cat's Cradle had moved, and it was flat duo jets. I could have been 18. Dexter was 17, and I write about it in the book. I was given new raiment, and I saw Dexter a bunch of times, and I play guitar, not particularly well, but enough to sort of halfway know what I'm doing. I've looked at Dexter's hands and heard what was coming out of the amp and not been able to reconcile that. The guy he was always filled with the spirit, which could be quite problematic at times, but he was also capable of a kind of a sublime form of expression that if you saw him, then you saw him. And everything that came later was already there with Dexter in terms of a kind of an emotional abandonment of sort of a fierce authenticity.
Yeah, there was one thing, that was it. There was nothing, no distraction.
And nothing else mattered. And he's wearing a necklace made out of chicken bones. I don't know what the fuck was going on. And so you see stuff like that when you're an impressionable youngster and you go like, I will go that way. That's the direction I will go. Even if I make a different sound, I'm not going to mimic anyone. And so the being true to that spirit is not copying that sound. It's doing the thing that's most authentically you. And it could be Bill McCormick cracking eggs on his head, in the Hardback Cafe. Yeah.
The first time Dexter played, I think it was the first time he played the Cradle, he was a kid. And Marcia and we asked Mr. Lyons, who's the ABC guy, I said, well, he wants to play, but I think he's like 12 or whatever. So Mr. Lyons, he thought a while, he said, if his mother comes, he can play. And she did. She came in. She came and sat there.
I interviewed Dex for this aborted radio show idea, where it was the Universal. We recorded bands live at Overdub Lane in Durham. It's about 2010, 2011. And Dex Romweber Duo came out, so it's Dex and Sarah. And Dex played a song called Lonesome Train or something like that. And he goes, there are 3 lonesome trains, and gave me the lowdown on each version of these different songs and who did them and what label they recorded them on. And then he started talking about Liberty Records, it's a Chapel Hill label in the 50s. It was great. I mean, I just sat at his feet and listened. And then he plays his song where his hair's on fire, and he does that stuff where he's shrieking and
Every
God,
day.
it was wonderful. That guy was so serious. Peace be upon him.
Amen. Yeah.
And Sarah. Jesus.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk us about your career when you really took off and with Hell and all that. 'Cause-
Yeah.
no, you should. I mean,
Well, okay, so I wrote a song called Hell. It was a single tone calypso because I was listening to a lot of calypso thanks to WXYC, and that was fun, and the Zippers needed a closer. And it was up tempo and it was obstreperous. And that's cool. And we put it on a record and that record came out and that record did pretty well. And 8 months later, that record had sold, we were on Mammoth Records, that record had shifted about 60,000 units. That was awesome. Because when Ken Mosier and I went down to Arden Studios in Memphis in '95 and met Jody Stevens, who was the drummer for Big Star, where we stammered out how much we admired his band and then tried to run away. And then Jody was like, would you boys like some carrot cake? So then we're eating carrot cake with Jody Stevens, and he gives me Jim Dickinson's phone number, and Jim Dickinson's like, I got a picture of Johnny Ace in his coffin. God damn, it was awesome. What am I saying? Oh yeah, so we put it on this record. It shipped to 60,000 units, and Jody Stevens is talking about Big Star's #1 record. How'd that do? 4,000. We couldn't get around. I was like, fuck, goddamn. So 60,000's great. It was what Superchunk was selling. And we're doing the next record. Steve Balcom at Mammoth. Need to have a meeting with the band right away. And we're like, well, we're dropped. They're going to fucking drop. They don't want to pay for the record. They're going to drop us. No. G105 wants to put this song into rotation. At some point, Steve goes, and KROQ in Los Angeles was thinking about it because we played the Kevin and Bean show. It's all a bunch of inside baseball. And Steve goes, you have a hit. And I said, what does that mean? I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. What it meant was that top 40, because when Nirvana broke, college radio went top 40 functionally, right? So alternative music went mainstream. They met hard. They collided in a very spectacular way. And as a result of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, corporations like Clear Channel were able to snap up a bunch of radio and television stations in markets across the country. And so what you had was functionally the destruction of regionalism in music. So that whole robust regional indie scene of the 1980s and early 90s had functionally been turned into Matchbox 20 world, where if you went to one market, you could hear whoever it was that came out of Austin or Boston or North Carolina. Now you're just hearing Creed. Sucked for everybody, gave me a hit song. And Tom Osborne was working West Coast rep for Mammoth Records. And he said that he would get calls from program directors who would scream at him about how much they hated the fucking Squirrel Nut Zippers, and then tell him they were putting it into heavy rotation. Because they were a Clear Channel station, and they felt like dominoes. And so it's a good song, I really like it. And I'm proud, I am proud. But I'm not kidding myself, because it came at that weird inflection time when people were like, okay, there is no other Nirvana, what are we going to do? Let's just see what sticks to the wall. It was a real sort of free-for-all. Mm-hmm. And whatever that, swing movement thing was a thing for a minute. But it felt strange. It felt disproportionate, and I struggled with it because it was disproportionate. It was like, you're overplaying, and nobody from the label understood that viewpoint. Yeah. What?
You were talking about record companies buying up the radio stations. They're also buying up the clubs.
Yeah.
Were they?
No, they are now. We're really lucky that we have Frank, because Emily Franz.
We've always been lucky we have Frank.
She was talking about, from Watch Out, she was talking about how half the places they play now, it's all like...
Live Nation.
Live Nation.
Live Nation's about everything.
She's buying everything.
Independent clubs are very important.
Yeah. So,
independent anything is very important.
To defend it, but
Yeah.
This is not Amazon.
no.
And when Amazon comes in and buys up whatever they buy up, a hardware store, a bookstore. They don't just buy the physical product and make it easier for you to get. They take away the human interaction where you go into a place and you form a relationship with the people who work at that place, who can recommend books to you, who can play you something in a way that's open format and not, dictated by a regimented or homogenized playlist. You understand what I'm saying? And this is a thing that is legitimately ours, that has almost been taken away, but is available to us. And this room full of human beings who had this shared experience is more important than anything else.
Than stockholders.
Than stockholders. Oh yeah. No, I'm a socialist. Let's do it. This book is ultimately an anti-capitalist screed. Is it embarrassing?
What?
Did you say it's embarrassing?
No, I said to the barricades.
Oh yeah, to the barricades. You first, Bill.
I'm not embarrassed.
I need to freshen up a little bit before I start throwing bricks.
Right. Okay, well, what do we should talk about? Folks? Should we talk about more bands? Let's see. Well, I should have talked about people that are still in the business. That at the beginning of the book, there were a lot more than there are in the end.
Verge Records.
Yeah, but I mean, artists as well.
Eric Bachman. Eric Johnson from Spatula.
Yes,
doing wonderful work.
Yeah.
Oh God, fucking Southern Culture on the Skids,
Yes.
folks.
Amazing.
Southern Culture on the Skids. I think their first record, they sort of like home release their first record in 85, 84.
I don't know. I remember seeing them play at the Varsity Theater. They opened for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they were brand new. They had just formed up. So
Stan Lewis was in
Stan was in the band. Yes, he was.
Rick Miller talks in the book about they had been signed to DGC, Nirvana's label, a Geffen subsidiary, and they did well, and they had a hit with Camel Walk. And now these guys are used to like turn and burn, make their own records, tour their butts off. Hardest working band in the business. Geffen is like, we want to re-up, but you have to sell more records. And Rick was like, they kind of had their discussions about it in the band. And he said, they're just setting us up to fail. If we'd done that, we wouldn't have existed anymore. Because they wanted us to spend the same money we would have spent making a whole record, making a demo and giving them most of the money to the producer and all that sort of major label stuff. And they quit. They walked away from it. And they're still doing their thing, because Geffen would have buried them. And and he also said, I wish I talked to him earlier, he said, I never signed away my publishing.
Right. You talk about that a lot in the beginning of this.
Well, it's boring.
The
but
labels
important.
would take the rights to your work.
Yes.
When they signed you, and then when they let you go, they still owned your work.
Yes. And your likeness.
I didn't know that, but I mean.
Yeah. So, it's the sort of like they're the bank, they're going to lend you the money.
Right.
And so you
It's
make
hard
the
to
record,
resist.
but they own the record.
Yeah.
That's fine. And then publishing houses were and so a lot of what it was like, we're going to give you an advance. We're going to give you advance against royalties. Well, a lot of bands were like, that's the only money we're ever going to see.
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense. And a lot of labels have done a lot of great things, but like, I'm not sure how many of them did what Merge did and probably still does, which is to profit share 50-50. It's not normally the case. When we renegotiated our contract after going platinum, that is to say shifting over 1 million units, we got it to where the band as a collective made $1.26 per CD sold, and each CD was being sold for $16. I understand the exigencies of the business, and I very much love my friends who worked at Mammoth Records who are here tonight. I love them with my whole ass heart. But the music industry exists on a spectrum of either good intentions or human trafficking. And it still does.
Well said.
Now, no one wants to talk to me. But it's a nasty business, and it still is,
Well, a lot of us are beneath the radar here, so maybe
Yeah.
we're still
I shouldn't have drunk that beer. And so I should have.
There's more here. Have one.
No, I thought that was yours.
I have one.
Okay.
I mean, she says we have all we want. Okay, let's see. We were going to talk about the Chavis brothers and
The Vel.
the Vel. Yes.
Have y'all heard that record? So
Oh yeah, tell them that. This is so
okay, so
great.
the Vel did a record. So the Vel were amazing. I go to a house party on Macaulay Street in 1986, and the Velt's playing, and I'm like, oh my hell, what is this? These guys are in suits. They're tight as ticks. This is making us look bad. And twins, like fronting, damn. So they're on another level. And there's a bidding war. They get signed to Capitol Records. They make a record. Capitol's like, sure, we'll send you to Europe. You know, and they're listening to Cocteau Twins and all this stuff and Echo and the Bunnymen. People are like, well, you are black, you know. Just whatever, we don't give a shit. So they go over, and the record is produced by Cocteau Twins guitarist Robin Guthrie. Now, Marvin Levy, the drummer, gets kicked out because they find sticks in his bag, and nobody had gotten him work visas. So out he goes. They send him back on the same plane he flew in on. But the band makes a record with Robin Guthrie, and it's just amazing. It's fantastic. Everything looks amazing. And then their A&R guy gets canned. That is to say, the person who signed them in the sort of interface between the band and the label gets fired, the band gets dropped. The record gets shelved. Why? Because Capitol owns the masters, so that record gone. That was 1989. The Velt released that record that was originally called Marigolds. I forgot what they called it now. They just issued it. Shoot, less than 6 months ago. It's wonderful. Go listen to it. Such a star-crossed band, perfectly capable of shooting themselves in the foot, but entirely and always committed to the music. And they go, after they made Aphrodisiac, an unbelievably good record. Their A&R guy gets fired and they get dropped from Polygram 4 months later. They can't catch a break. And part of that is because major labels suck and weird, crazy things happen, and it's a dynamic and fluid situation. And the other part of it, as I say in the book, is that I think that the major record label industry of the mid-1990s didn't know what to do with a biracial band. It was a segregated industry, and it still is. And so the Chavis brothers would come in and go, they went to Robin Guthrie and they were like, we love the Cocteau Twins, we heard your records and our lives were changed. Can we get the Bomb Squad to come in and do beats on it? And which would have changed the world. And Robin Guthrie was like, isn't it funky enough, you know? Or they're going to whoever, their A&R, and going like, can we put beats on like Run DMC? No. Can we get a remix from, no. And had someone listened and paid attention, and as Danny or Daniel rightly pointed out, here comes Beck, or whatever, the white guy who could rap, and boom, that stuff goes right out. But they'd go to the Velt and go like, well, you're just so unique, we don't know what to do with you. And I'm like, y'all are not paying attention. Y'all don't understand there's like a money tree growing,
And unique was a backhanded compliment, I think.
They're still going. And they were honored by the city of Raleigh, I think, a year or two ago.
We saw them Sunday.
And rightly so. And they're.
I love that record's released. I didn't realize that.
It's a great record. It sounds amazing.
They got it out.
Cheryl, have you heard
out
it?
Of the vault.
I have one of the early demos.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's excellent.
I wish Marvin had been on it, but yeah. So, they're in the book.
Oh yeah, no, that's what,
Yeah.
They said something to the effect of that they opened for Cocteau Twins in Miami, was that?
Yes.
And that everybody came up and couldn't understand why a black band had been asked to open for that kind of band.
Yeah.
And they were offended properly. But he was very nice. He went on and said, back home, that never came up. People didn't single us out.
I don't remember anybody giving a shit.
No, that's what they said. And I was grateful to hear that. But,
And at that gig, Daniel comes up and says, someone asked why a black band is opening for Cocteau Twins, and here's our response. and they just play their set, and then at the end of the last song, he comes up and goes, "That's why we're opening for Concerts." And they get a standing ovation. It's just, I say it's frustrating. I can't imagine the level of frustration of why in the world can't we, why are we barred from loving this Porcupine record by Echo and the Bunnymen as much as you?
They were pigeonholed.
It's just dumb.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was glad that. Anyway, this is a wonderful record. This is like there's so much stuff in here. We'd be here all night if we went year by year. But he's gotten it all written down. And I think it's really important.
It's not all written. There's so much I couldn't put in there.
Well, you got a lot.
I got a lot, yeah. But I was kept up at night about.
It's like this, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you got it all. Even this much. I mean, if you say you had to.
Well, I talked to a bunch of sweet people.
Yeah, but I mean,
who were
like,
very generous with their time, and I don't know. It's a sweet spot of where most of us are still alive, and we've gotten over our bullshit, and we're able to have the the appropriate perspective and talk about this. But I'll tell you this: two things were consistent. Not one of those people ever thought they were cool, and even though they were super cool, and they all knew on some level, and then and certainly now, how fortunate they were to have lived and thrived in that community, and were very mindful of it. And I would say, like, this is what the book's about, or here's my angle, Kirk Ross.
Right.
He goes, "You're singing my song," and so I kept having the theme just articulated to me without bidding, because everyone feels the same way as you do too, about not because it was a really strange and wonderful time.
No argument.
Yeah, and I don't think, and what I want to underscore is that it's not unique to us. I mean, the sort of particulars of it were, of course, and yay us. But it's happened before, and it will happen again, because it's fairly common elements of sort of community. Things like third places, what the sociologist Ray Oldham calls third places that are not work or church, like the Hardback Cafe, or Sadlax, where you could go and hang out and meet people, or God help us, Tijuana Fast. You interact and you're inspired and you exchange ideas. And the people who give you platforms of expression, like Mammoth Records, who took a lot of chances on a lot of bands, and Merge Records, who just created a grassroots industry.
35 years is
come on. In this business,
amazing.
It's incredible. Or WXYC, that so relentlessly supported local music. And every single person that came out to the shows, the bus boys, your colleagues, your co-workers, UNC students, Bill Smith, all of Crook's Corner, Lane Worcester on the clock, walking down to local 506. There weren't anybody in there. And
we'd run out the back kitchen door in our aprons to get to the next show.
I talked to Mark Klein from Love Tracker, a great Athens band, and I said, you went through the same thing. You experienced the same thing. And he said, yes. He goes, it wasn't the bands that created that scene. It was the community that created that scene. It's the community that created those bands. He said, if that scene was a cold, we were just the sneezes. And so that's really what it's about. When you read retrospectives like this, it's like, this band sold the most records and they're very important. That's not the right measure of success, I think. That's not the right metric. And no one who saw him perform is going to judge Dexter Romweber on how many records he sold. It's foolish. It's looking through the wrong end of the telescope.
Agreed.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? Are we?
We have 45 minutes. So I think you're going to have to start dancing.
Look out.
Do you want to go to questions?
Oh, and do we do questions? You want to do?
It's up to you all.
I'm down for questions.
All right.
Just nothing Oh, fuck it, just ask me. Glenn Booth.
I do have a question.
Yes.
And I might be embarrassing myself. What is the name of the book from?
Oh, the great Sean Rogers.
Yes.
I met Sean when he was a tyke with a baseball cap, stuffing plastic sleeves, still wearing one, for Moist Bated Breath Records, a tot waiting at Chili's. And then all of a sudden he's like, I don't know what, instrumental in putting together the Big Record Stardom Convention. Then he's got his own label, Hepcat Records. Then he's managing Archers of Loaf. Then he's working at Mammoth. And we were talking about 1992, which was, I think, the gravitational center of the book. God, it was great. $2, you could see anybody, and they were amazing. And there were at least 4 of them every night if you had the stamina. A house party here, a show there, somebody's backyard over here.
Exactly.
The Big Record Stardom Convention, it was incredible. And Sean was talking about Eric Bachman going like, well, you're in the music business. Would you like to be our manager? He's like the radio guy at Moist Bated Breath. Yes, okay. And then he grabs the everything you need to know about the music industry book and reads it, because that's the prerequisite to management. And Sean said, he's talking about going to all these rehearsals of all these bands like Archers of Loaf, who were his friends and sometimes his roommates, but then he would see this music being made and would be amazed. And he told me there were these incredible bands, but they were all just people we knew. It was a really strange and wonderful time, because this town has always been full of music lovers, and I've always loved that. And I said, I think you just named my book. And there it is. Yeah, thank you. No royalties. But I will sign a copy for you. And like, again, it's, I don't know. The thing just wouldn't happen without people like Sean. And the people who are like, I'm going to stuff plastic sleeves of bicycle face 7 inches. Because it's just important to me. I don't think I'm actually being paid right now. I may not be getting paid. Does it matter? You can make your money somewhere else. You're putting this thing out, you're documenting this thing, you're participating in this thing, you're a part of this thing. It doesn't matter that you can play an instrument or not. It doesn't matter that you can sing or that you're a performer, because that's just an aspect of the thing itself, like hubcaps are an aspect of a car. It's not what makes the thing go. So thank you. And thank all you beautiful people. Phil Collins taught me how to play bar chords. Phil Collins taught me how to play the riff for Driver 8. Do you think that I would have become a rock star if I didn't know how to play the riff to fucking REM's Driver 8?
I know.
And it's just a very free, sharing, inclusive.
I think it was a tribe, sort of.
There's a collective identity, and I think you need to have that. And I'm prouder than proud to consider myself a member of that. Questions? Yes.
You actually kind of touched upon how, with the changing of like the era and
Yeah.
the advent of the internet and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of similar how the communities just kind of moved to the internet. I mean, if all these bands,
Yeah.
all of that, who do you think would be one of the best examples from this era that really could have benefited from indie distribution?
Oh, well, distribution, okay.
Playing,
Yeah.
Any sort of
Yeah.
platform that the internet would have given them.
So I talked to Joe Fleischer, who is an industry guy. I don't remember, Joe may have been working for Elektra or something like that. And Joe ended up editing for Hits magazine. Now, for those of you who are not in the industry, Hits was a very big deal. Hits was very much a thing where if they gave you the nod, you were in. They were based in LA, and they were very, very influential. Some EDM nerd friend of Joe's says, have you heard of MP3s? This is in 1995. And so he sends him a file. They do a peer-to-peer, a crude peer-to-peer connection. He gets an MP3, which takes so long that he goes out to eat brunch with his girlfriend and comes back while the one song is downloading. And he hits play and he listens to the song on his speakers, and he goes out into the living room and is just standing there slack-jawed, and his girlfriend's like, what? And he's like, the entire music industry is over. Because he understood then what was coming. And he said specifically to me, imagine if the indie music infrastructure had had access to digital distribution at that time, when there's that beautiful full flowering of that that kind of expression. And the reason he said that to me was because when I talked to Mac McCon and I talked to Steve Balcom and everybody else, the bugaboo and the thing that put Moist Bated Breath out of business was distribution. So you had to sell your records to these distributors who may or may not bother to pay you. And Andrew Peterson was like, Dutch East Indies owed us 75 grand. They weren't paying us. We went out of business. There's nothing you could do about it. Or they wouldn't pay you unless you gave them a new record. So it was hugely problematic. And all those guys were in competition with each other, and it was tough. Mammoth did a distribution deal that saved their bacon. It was fantastic. It was great for everybody. Merch had to duke it out. You know, Cargo went out of business. It was tough. Distribution was tough. A lot of payola. You had to pay to get your stuff in end caps. You had to pay to get it in retail. So when Joe Fleischer was talking about, specifically, he goes, imagine what Merge Records could have done if they'd had access to this. They could have just elided all of the literally the sort of brick and mortar bullshit. But that's not what happened. So, my immediate answer is Merge Records. But anyone who, so when Nirvana hits and everything, it's huge, what happens in Chapel Hill is that the majors come and they're looking for whoever Nirvana 2 is. There are a lot of bands that sort of ish fit the mold. Great bands. Superchunk, Archers, Polvo, great bands. There are a lot of bands that did not fit the mold. And so some advanced while others receded. And it was because of the downward pressure of the industry scramble, And the industry were so sort of centralized. Tim Summer, who signed Hootie and the Blowfish, was like, the reason that Black Girls or if they lived in New York or Los Angeles, would have been signed by a major instantly, but because they lived in North Carolina, it was considered a backwater and no one bothered. Digital distribution would just shoot right past that stuff, So I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't have benefited from it, to be honest. To the extent that, like Bill said, it gives you a lot more control. I've never heard of this band. Nobody's telling me that I need to see this band. They formed their own community online, and they get to perform in a physical space, and people will come out and see them and sing along and know the lyrics. So it's not all bad. Anybody else? Yes, hand.
I saw a clip on YouTube of Squirrel Nut Zippers on Sesame Street.
Yes. That's how you know you made it. I'm sorry, what's the question?
Was there, what was the experience like being on Sesame Street?
What's the...
What was Cookie Monster like?
I wasn't there. I had quit the band, but they did my song. So I rubbed my hands together like an evil villain. I wish I could tell you what it was like. I wish. Because I saw that show when it came out, That was the end, that was the last word. And I saw the performance where they rewrote it to. So I wish I could answer that, but I can't. There were a lot of jarring things, like experiences like that though, where you're standing behind the couch in the Tonight Show end credits, and William H. Macy turns around and looks at you and says, "Sure beats digging ditches, don't it?" And I was like, yes. Yes, it does, William H. Macy. This is so weird. Anyway.
I think we're good for 2 more questions, and then we've got some announcements about how to do the signing line.
Okay. Let's see.
What did Peggy want?
Peggy wanted to be a sex kitten, but she couldn't afford the overhead. Just yet. I didn't write that lyric. Yes.
Tell a happy, fun story to go out on a high note instead of about capitalism.
Well, we're in a bookstore and there's a lot of similarities, so welcome to our world.
I loved every minute of it, even when it was awful. I loved every minute, even when I was sick unto death, prostrate in the back bench of the 15-passenger van. I couldn't believe my good fortune. The greatest thing that ever happened to me professionally was meeting Fats Waller's guitar player, Al Casey, because I got a reissue. RCA reissued all the Fats Waller recorded material. And in the liner notes, they said, Al Casey is the only surviving member. I loved Al because he played an acoustic guitar, an archtop, and he played solos that were chorded solos, kind of clunky, really sweet. It always sounded like he was handing you a bunch of flowers. I called every Al Casey in the New York directory until I found the one that answered yes. At which point I started babbling. And anyway, then we become friends. We hang out with Al. We go see his band in New York. His band is gigging. I write a song called Pallin' with Al. We're playing a show at Irving Plaza. Al comes up and he plays a song. And I'm like, was kind of proud of the bridge. It was kind of a Wallerian bridge, you know. And I'm like, Al, the bridge is a little complex, you know, like an asshole. This guy's been playing since he was 16. And he goes, just run through it one time, I'll latch on. He took 2 courses. And I had to turn my back to the crowd because tears were streaming down my face. It was the single greatest thing that had ever happened. Just flat. I don't care about the fucking platinum records or nothing. Like, meeting that guy, talking about strings and tour buses, you know what I mean? Him pulling out his photo album, finding that person that you do just so admire and connecting in that manner. A person, by the way, because of the color of their skin and their age, would technically not, you would not be able to interact with, that you would not cross paths with, even though you have more in common than you do with most other people walking down the street. It was an incredible experience, and he signed the back of my guitar. Him and Richard Thompson. I know. So that's the kind of stuff that can happen, you know, when you're getting whatever that schlep is, you know, when you're touring. Stuff like that will happen. And it's hard to reconcile. It's so beautiful. So I hope that's happy enough.
Love it.
We're going to do a little